My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life. And I was muted for some reason. All right, well, welcome to the Duck Milk Prod YouTube channel. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and this live stream is part of a series I am calling Reading Reviews with Rebecca because I like alliteration, which will analyze the critical reception of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice through the negative reviews written by top critics from Rotten Tomatoes, one review at a time. This is not meant to belittle anyone's opinions, but rather serve as a study of art criticism and how we discuss film. That includes me. I'm hoping that this endeavor will encourage us all to be better consumers of cinema. This week, I'll be reading through a review from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram titled Movie Review, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, written by Preston Jones. You can click on the link in the video description below if you'd like to follow along and read it for yourself, which I encourage you to do. If Preston Jones should ever see this video, I just want to say that I'm aiming to do this as civilly and analytically as possible, and I would ask that anyone watching live or posting in the comments would do the same. I'm simply taking a look at the criticism for and of BVS now from an historical point of view, given that these reviews were used by Warner Brothers in their decision-making process regarding the DC Extended Universe. And due to the poor reviews for Batman v Superman, the tone and approach to the franchise were changed for Justice League and ultimately led to the destruction of the Snyderverse story, the 5-film arc story that Zack Snyder had planned for his set of films. Before I get into Preston Jones's thoughts, I'm sure some people out there are like, well, Preston Jones is a professional critic and a professional reviewer, Rebecca. What do you have to say about anything that's going to matter to anybody? Well, it's a great question. I'm glad you asked it because I probably would be asking it of myself if it was someone else doing it. So I'm going to provide you with a little bit of background on me, and hopefully that will help answer that question. I graduated from the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, with a degree in telecommunications and film and a focus on broadcast television production. While I've never been to film school, in my television and production experience, I've learned about and have lots of practice in operating cameras, shot composition, and editing. Lighting, green screen, and audio are my weak spots, admittedly, but I've been working on those. After working in local TV news, running cameras, and working in production, I got a job at Turner, now Warner Media, or whatever they're calling themselves now, for 14 years. I worked with networks, or brands as they call them now, like TBS, TNT, Adult Swim, Cartoon Network, Boomerang, True TV, and Turner Classic Movies as a video encoding specialist. I also did a fair amount of closed captioning work and DVD and Blu-ray QC. In case you are wondering how I podcasted about Supergirl and the DCEU films while working for a Time Warner company, I actually got permission and clearance from my human resources representative. If you think I wouldn't criticize stories that were under the same corporate umbrella, That was never a problem nor a concern for me. If I thought the Supergirl TV series or a DCEU film had faults, I said so. In the last 17 years, I have served as a director, technical director, and camera operator at my local church in a live production capacity. I've been a video editor for 17 years, having worked in Avid, Final Cut, and Premiere Pro CC. In my day job, I shoot and edit news and documentary-style video content that involves interviews and narrative storytelling. I'm also currently an amateur photographer and am aiming to improve my efforts in still photography. You can check out my work over at Instagram at @TheDerbyKid. Link is in the video description below. While discussing these film reviews, music and film scores will inevitably come up. It may be good to know that in my life, I have played piano, handbells, clarinet, bass clarinet, bassoon, acoustic guitar, and have even started learning how to play the ukulele. I've played in marching bands, symphonic bands, and wind ensembles, and have sung in many choirs. While I don't consider myself a world-class musician, far from it, actually, I do know some things about music and am a big fan of film scores and soundtracks. In addition to my production and musical experience, I have had lots of experience in art criticism. I've been podcasting about television and film since 2009 and do so on a regular basis with Supergirl Radio, a podcast I co-host about the CW Supergirl TV series. I am also a writing contributor to the Justice League Universe podcast that offers analysis on the DCEU films. You might even hear my voice occasionally in recordings and audio commentaries over there. I'm not an expert, but I care deeply about film, television, storytelling, and art. So I hope this gives you a background on where I'm coming from. Okay, so let's get into this film review from Preston Jones. Just making sure my mic and my headphones are okay. I'm trying to make sure I get the right level for myself to hear myself. Okay, so now that we've gotten all of my background out of the way, I just want to get into the review right at the beginning. I usually start with the title of these reviews. It's a great place to start, I think. But the title of this one is pretty boring and lazy. It's just movie review : Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, which I guess tells you everything you need to know about the review. It is a movie review. It's a movie review about Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. So I guess in that it accomplishes what it's setting out to do. I find it a little lazy, but this may not be Preston's fault. It could have been his editor. It could have been someone else who was helping him with this review. So I can't put that all on Preston. So I'm just going to say that maybe it could have been a little more creative. That would have been a little more, eye-catching when you read it right off the gate. But as it is, it's just a functional title telling you what we're going to get into. So I guess it's accomplishing its job. It should be noted that in this review on this website, it does have an audio version of the review. Sometimes we've had, I think, at least one of these in the past in this series where there was a shorter version that was an audio version that just kind of hit the highlights of the review. But this one actually read the entire review. I guess some of these may be for accessibility purposes. So if you can't see, if you're blind, the audio version is a way for blind people to consume the review. So in that way, I applaud that they're thinking about accessibility usage on the website here. But there are some things to note. We're going to read the review all the way through, just like the audio version does. But we're not going to actually listen to that audio version because I'm going to be reading it. But it should be noted that there are some things to point out about the audio version because I did listen through it all the way through. It does have an ad in the middle of it, which, hey, I don't fault them for it. Monetize if you can. Get that money if you can get it. I just thought it was kind of hilarious that this film that Preston did not care for was actually making his outlet money. So I just wanted to point that out. And it should also be mentioned that the reader of the audio version mispronounced Henry Cavill's name, pronouncing it as Cavill, which is a very mispronunciation, a very common mispronunciation, I guess I could say also, of Henry Cavill's name. I like to think of it, if you're having trouble remembering how to pronounce Henry Cavill's name correctly, I just rhyme it with travel. And that's how I remember it. So if that's helpful to anyone, Henry Cavill. So that's how I remember it, but it's not Cavill. Even though it's sort of it reads kind of like that, it's actually Cavill. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so actually getting into the actual body of the review. So we'll get into it now. So the first bit reads, quote, "In almost every measurable sense, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice is big. The level of anticipation is through the roof. The amount of money invested, an estimated budget of 250 million, is staggering, and the plot, largely under wraps to this point, is a gargantuan tangle of people, places, and things. But given the spoiler-phobic culture in which we exist, so much so that the screening I attended was prefaced with a taped plea from director Zack Snyder to divulge none of the twists and turns so that other viewers may approach the film with its surprises intact," unquote. Now, this is not the first of these reviews that I'm going through with the top critics of Rotten Tomatoes, and specifically Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. This is not the first one of these to mention that Zack Snyder had a pre-taped video that screened before the critics saw the film, asking viewers not to spoil it. And personally, I find it odd that they do this. Isn't it pretty much expected that if you are writing these reviews with the intent to publish them before the public gets to view the film, that you won't spoil them? Don't all studios and all directors and even all fans go into these reviews with the expectation that you won't spoil it for them? The only exceptions that I know of personally that are considered acceptable to talk about spoilers are the YouTubers who make it very clear in their video titles, their video descriptions, and their thumbnails that they will be talking about spoilers. Usually, YouTubers will have a spoiler-free version of a review, and then later they'll have a spoiler-filled version of the review. And at least in those set of circumstances, the reviewer makes it clear, I am going to be spoiling things of this film. So please go into it with this in mind so that if you don't want to be spoiled, don't watch that video. So they make it very clear. But with a review like this that is intent to be released probably like a week before the film comes out, there is an expectation that you're not going to be spoiling things for the public. People will be very angry if that happens. And I can't remember specific instances, but I know that's happened in the past where maybe a reviewer mentioned something that spoiled parts of it, and people who read it were not very pleased about it. So it does happen on the occasion. So I have that expectation. So I'm assuming that most people do, and maybe I shouldn't assume, but I would gather that most people going into reading a review from the top critics of Rotten Tomatoes would go into it not wanting to be spoiled. They just want to know what someone thought about the film, but they don't want you to tell everything about the film. So I don't know why this is such seemingly to these critics, it seems like, as I read it, it seems like they think that Zack Snyder's pre-taped video was an unreasonable or unusual request, which I don't think it is at all. I think it's very reasonable and something that should be just assumed that you won't spoil the film for people. And so I've been wondering why do they care so much about mentioning this? This has happened a couple of times in these reviews, and I'm wondering if these reviewers just want to drop Zack Snyder's name in their review as some kind of clout thing because they went to a special screening where they saw a special video of Zack Snyder talking to them. He was talking to them. They are special people that he was only talking to them. Oh my gosh, they're so elite. It was the only people who got this special video. Uh, but I hate to spoil their bubbles, though. I hate to burst this bubble for Preston. I saw this same video at a fan screening before the film officially came out in the theaters. It wasn't just for critics, it was fans too. And the thing about the video when I saw it the first time with other fans is that we saw that video and we were like, yeah, okay, cool. I'm not going to spoil it. And we walked out of that theater having seen it like, oh my gosh, we didn't know that the Flash was going to come in the Batcave. Holy crap. Oh my gosh, Superman died. All of those things, like the Capitol building exploded. we saw all of those things. And I think as fans, at least from my perspective, in terms of me walking out of the theater and also kind of walking out of the theater with other fans who were talking about the film as we were leaving, that there was this expectations that, yeah, we don't want to spoil this for people. This is a big deal. Like, other fans should be able to enjoy it like we did. I think fans are pretty respectful about that, unless you're a huge jerk, and some people maybe are. But I don't think fans have, and I don't want to speak on behalf of all fans, but from my experience at those fan screenings, fans generally don't want to spoil it for other fans. Like, we try to we try to keep that expectation and that surprise for other people because we don't want to be spoiled either. So I don't know. I guess I'm just putting my personal experience and my personal way of viewing things into it. But I don't think it's an unreasonable request to say, "Hey, by the way, don't spoil this film for people." Yeah, that's a reasonable expectation. So I don't know, critics ain't special. Fans saw it too. So I really can't tell you why these reviewers care so much about that pre-taped video of Zack Snyder saying, "Hey, by the way, if you could, just don't spoil things and ruin this experience for other people." I don't know why they care about that so much. So maybe if it comes up again, we can readdress that issue from another perspective. Maybe we'll find another perspective to it that we haven't gotten to yet. Okay, continuing on. Preston writes, quote, "Writing about why Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, is such a colossal misfire becomes a delicate and difficult business," unquote. Why? Why is it a delicate and difficult business? This is your job. This is what you're paid to do as a critic. If you can't write about a film without spoiling it, I hate to tell you, but you might not be great at it. Like, you should be able to write about a film without spoiling it. That might be a good practice for people. If you want to be a film critic or a film reviewer, practice that. Practice writing about a film without giving major plot points away. That might mean that you actually dig into the themes or the character journeys. You can talk about those things without spoiling major plot points. See if you can do that. See if you can this would be my advice to people. And this may be something that I apply to my own art criticism. Talk about something without giving it away by talking about the cinematography. What did the visuals look like? What did the score make you feel? What were the emotions that the score made you bring out of your experiences into the film? How was the acting performance? Did the actors make you believe the character experiences? How was the pacing? Was the editing good? You can talk about all of those things without spoiling any plot points. There are so many other things that you can talk about. Even if you get into themes can get a little tricky because sometimes the themes play into the plot. But like with BBS, you could talk about some of these themes. You could talk about corruption. You could talk about beings being powerful, the problem of evil. You could talk about God and man. You could talk about all those things without spoiling major plot points in the film and still maintain what Zack Snyder asked to not spoil things. So I think that would be a good practice for anybody who wants to be a film critic or a film reviewer, or even for someone like Preston Jones himself. You can write. It's not difficult to talk about or write about a film without giving things away. It is possible. I just want to encourage people to try harder. Sometimes if you can't write a review without spoiling something, it seems lazy to me. So I'm just encouraging people to try a little harder, dig a little deeper when you write these reviews. Okay, continuing on, Preston writes, quote, "In that sense, it is monumentally tricky to articulate precisely why this eagerly awaited superhero flick is the cinematic equivalent of lighting many millions of dollars ablaze with no regard for anything other than ensuring that the next decade's worth of sequels, prequels, and other ancillary products is properly launched. So without giving anything away, after all, I would hate to disappoint Snyder, someone for whom the wanton destruction of large metropolitan areas remains a clear and disturbing fetish, I will say that Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice delivers nothing beyond CGI-enhanced spectacle," unquote. Well, this is why Preston, I think, is having trouble writing about this film without spoiling anything because Preston is not able to articulate things about the film. Preston just sees it as a CGI spectacle. That's it. If that's all you see of the film, then you can't talk about it. If you can't talk about the characters or the story or the philosophy or the theology or the themes or the score or the cinematography or any number of things, the acting performances, if you can't talk about other that than anything, if you can't talk about those things and you only see it as a CGI fest, then of course you can't write about it. So maybe that's part of the problem. But I like the way that this is written because it comes across to me as if Preston wants to tell me why Batman wants to tell you. I think he's writing this for all of us. He wants to tell us why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice is so bad. It's such a bad film, but he actually can't articulate why that is. Like he can't actually justify anything that he thinks. And so he's I think what he's doing is using possible spoilers, like, oh no, I don't want to spoil it for you because Zack Snyder said I shouldn't. I think he's using possible spoilers to cover up the fact that he actually can't justify what he's writing, that he can't actually back up any of his arguments or any of his points. If he can't talk about it, if he can't spoil it, if he can't talk about those things in detail, then you're just going to have to believe him that BVS is just such a terrible film. You're just going to have to go on his word because he can't tell you details. He can't explain it. So just trust Preston on this. Preston also writes, quote, no regard for anything other than ensuring sequels, prequels, and product launches. So there's no story in BVS. The only thing that the film contains is a sequel setup. Is Preston sure about that? That's what I would ask him. You sure about that? Is that true? Because all I remember was a couple things. Was a sequence setting up the Justice League that lasted a few minutes and a nightmare sequence that lasted about 5 minutes. So we're probably talking about a total of 7 minutes out of a film that lasts 153 minutes, according to this review, and the time period before the ultimate cut. This is the theatrical version we're talking about. So if those sequences that kind of set up the sequel last only about 7 minutes, but there's 153 minutes total, I'm not great at math, but if that's the case, what happens to the other 146 minutes? What's in the 146 minutes of this film? I'd like to know. I really wish that Preston could explain it to me. I wish that Preston would go into detail about this, but he can't. He can't. It's a spoiler. He can't talk about it. But he wants you to know this is a bad film. This section especially reads to me like a personal dig at Zack Snyder, who Zack Snyder asked so much from Preston with his plea not to spoil a film that a lot of people were really excited about it. But he's still, even when he's talking about Zack Snyder, he takes a dig at him, a personal dig to try to make him seem like such either a bad person or a bad director, or maybe both. He says the destruction of Metropolis is a, quote, clear and disturbing fetish, unquote. How is the flashback to the Battle of Metropolis between Superman and Zod? How is that a clear and disturbing fetish? What if you actually said it was a realistic portrayal of two Kryptonians fighting each other? You could say that it actually shows the consequences of two superpowered beings like Kryptonians who are super powerful, that it shows the consequences of two of those beings fighting each other, that then feeds into the story of Batman v Superman and provides a solid motivation for the character of Bruce Wayne in the film. Isn't that more accurate to say? That it's not so much a clear and disturbing fetish as it's just part of the story. And it leads into a setup for Batman v Superman and why Batman would have this revenge-driven story that he wants to kill Superman. To me, that shows a lack of analyzing a story and a lack of wanting to actually engage with the story in the film. If you're just saying, oh, it's just a fetish, Well, no, there's a reason that's in there. Zack Snyder wants to show the consequences of violence. He wants to show what would happen if these two Kryptonian superpowered beings fought each other. It wouldn't be all puppies and kittens and rainbows. It's going to have some destruction and people are going to die. That's just the reality of it. That's a realistic portrayal of that event. And it actually feeds into the story of the film that this review is talking about. So I find that strange and a little disheartening in terms of trying to engage with this reviewer, trying to get engaged with the film. The reviewer's not wanting to engage in the story of the film and just dismissing it as a personal dig and a personal attack at Zack Snyder. I find it disheartening because it shows a laziness, in my opinion, to the review. Preston also says, I will say that Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice delivers nothing beyond CGI enhanced spectacle. We're just going to have to believe Preston on this one. We're on this sentence in particular. We're just going to have to go with it on this one because, y'all, he can't spoil it. Zack Snyder asked him not to. So we're just going to have to keep reading these vague statements that are not backed up in any way and are definitely not a lazy analysis of the film. We're just going to have to go with it. So just keep that in mind. This is not the last time we're going to think this in the review. Or at least I should say that I'm going to think this in the review. I shouldn't speak for anybody watching this. All right, so Preston goes on to say, quote, for some, that will be more than enough. Watching Superman, played by Henry Cavill, reprising the role, and Batman, played by Ben Affleck, new to the cape and cowl, trade blows and snarled one-liners amid rain-soaked ruins of office buildings and abandoned mansions, unquote. This whole section lacks analysis and explanation of the entire film that's leading up to the Batman and Superman fight. It's not just, oh, they got together and fight. There's a whole story driven plot and a character driven plot that leads them to that moment where they fight each other. And that's not mentioned in here at all, I guess, because again, Preston didn't want to spoil it for us. Talking about the plot would be spoiling it for us, so he can't mention that. I also just a kind of, if I was the editor, if I was Preston's editor, I would push him on this a little bit. I would ask him questions like, why is it raining and storming during that sequence, Preston? You mentioned the rain-soaked ruins. Well, why is it raining? Why would Zack Snyder and why would Chris Terrio write the scene in a rainstorm? Why would it be storming and raining? I don't think it's spoilery to talk about that. I think you can talk about why it's set during a storm. Maybe it's possible that it's a visual metaphor of Bruce Wayne's anger. There's lightning and rain and storms. Maybe it's representative of the tears that Lois Lane will cry after the death of Superman not too long after this big fight. I don't know. I'm just putting things out there. You could push it a little more. Why is it raining? Why is that scene set during a rainstorm? Why is that? Why is it doing that in that scene? If I was the editor of this review, I would maybe push him on that and make him think about that a little more. Also, another question I'd probably ask if I was the editor, why are they fighting among the ruins of office buildings and abandoned mansions? Maybe it's because reviews like this complained about the civilian casualties in Man of Steel. Preston, previously, we just read him talking about the wanton destruction of metropolitan areas and how it was a clear and disturbing fetish. But then he complains that the fight is taking place in abandoned areas. You can't have it both ways. You can't complain about the destruction and then complain that there's no destruction. I don't think you can have it both ways. So that is very strange to me. Preston goes on to say he kind of goes in this section where he's starting to describe the characters and the actors who are playing the characters in the film. So he starts with Jeremy Irons. Quote, Jeremy Irons turns up every now and again as the weary Alfred, fretting and fixing things around the Batcave, unquote. This, to me, is such a simplistic description of Alfred in this film. Yes, he fixes things. He's seen repairing things and working on things. And yes, he is weary, but he's, as every great Alfred should be in a Batman story. He's Bruce Wayne's conscience. He's trying to get Bruce to return to his Batman rules. He's trying to knock some sense into him. He's trying to steer him back onto the right path. And to me, talking about Alfred in that way is much more meaningful than how Preston describes him here. So I think that's actually pretty unfortunate that Preston's not actually digging into the character of Alfred and why he's doing things and why he's saying the things that he is saying to Bruce in this film. Preston goes on to describe Lois and Amy Adams in this way. Quote, Amy Adams returns as Lois Lane, who toggles between damsel in distress and no-nonsense journalist, unquote. Sure, you could describe Amy Adams as Lois Lane like this. Sometimes she is a damsel in distress. Sometimes she does need saving. And sometimes in the film, she is a no-nonsense journalist. But that's also overlooking how extremely important she is to this film. She's pivotal to the storytelling and tracking down of Lex Luthor's actions and crimes that he's committing in the film. She's on his case. She gets the proof by the time she's up on the roof with Lex and by the time he pushes her off of that roof. And she's also the cool thing to me about Lois in the film is that she's actually an emotional representation of the world, of Earth for Superman as a reason to save humanity. And that's, I think, in my opinion, every great Superman story that has Lois in it should take that approach. She is the human being that when he sees her, he sees the world and why it's worth saving. And I think the film Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice does a really great job of that with the she was my world and you took her from me, and this is my world. There's even a track called This Is My World. And so I think that is a really great way to make Lois so important. They even during the flash sequence when he comes into the Batcave, he says Lois Lane is the key. Lois Lane is so important. She's not just a damsel in distress in this film. She's incredibly important. So I find that unfortunate that Preston here is really minimizing Lois Lane's importance to the story of this film. And I would say and argue Amy Adams' performance as Lois Lane. She does a really great job in the film. And then also Preston says, and Diane Lane reprises the thankless role of Martha Kent, unquote. Now, to me, when I read this, I ask questions like, why would this reviewer use this certain word? And Preston uses the word thankless role here to describe Diane Lane as Martha Kent in BVS. Why would Preston use that word? Because if you were to look it up, I wanted to just to make sure I understood the term so that Preston and I were on the same page with the term of thankless. Thankless, if you look up in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it has a couple of definitions, but they're kind of the same. It can mean unappreciated or ungrateful, not likely to obtain thanks, not expressing or feeling gratitude. So if Diane Lane's role is unappreciated, then that's on Preston. he's the one not appreciating Diane Lane's performance here and Martha's importance to how the big Superman and Batman fight turns out and what that does for Batman's character to save another mother named Martha. That's a big deal for the character of Bruce Wayne, for him to actually have that catharsis where he is able to save Martha, and he couldn't do that as a child, and he's able to do that and save Superman's mother. So I don't know if you think she's in a thankless role. That's on you for not appreciating her. So that's how I look at that. Preston also goes on to say, quote, for those who go to the movies to see coherent narratives, Dawn of Justice is Hollywood's latest exercise in fan service above all else, taking the usual screenplay ingredients of logic, reason, and character motivation, tossing it all in a blender and filming the scraps. Again, in dancing around the story without revealing too much, unquote. And we're going to stop it there. This is, again, when I look at this review and I read this, it's a lot of this reviewer writing things, like writing just these vague statements and doing his best to make this film seem bad, but not ever giving a reason for that, never giving an explanation for why he is saying and writing the things that he's doing. And his justification why he's not explaining it to you and explaining it to me is because he doesn't want to spoil anything. So he's doing it again here in this section of the review. Because you see, dear reader, this film is so poorly written. Preston just thinks it's so poorly written, but he can't tell you exactly why because he doesn't want to give it away. After all, the filmmaker asked him not to. He had a special video that Preston got to see at a special screening. And Zack Snyder asked him not to say anything. So he's just doing what the filmmaker wanted him to do. So he's just doing his part in being vague about everything and not actually justifying his assertions. So you're just going to, again, have to trust him on this, that BVS has a bad script. Continuing on, Preston writes, quote, suffice to say that Snyder and screenwriters Chris Terrio and David S. Goyer managed to desecrate not only Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, not that their oblivious dismantling stopped Nolan from taking a producing credit here, but also Frank Miller's 1980s revisionism of Batman and one of the classic Superman story arcs involving Doomsday, unquote. How does BVS manage to desecrate and dismantle Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy? How is the Dark Knight trilogy even relevant to this discussion, other than that they both include the character of Batman and Christopher Nolan has a credit in both of the films? BVS has nothing to do with the Dark Knight trilogy, which is a completely different Batman story directed by a completely different director with completely different actors portraying the character of Batman. I am okay, though, with Preston mentioning The Dark Knight Returns and the death of Superman because those comic book stories are relevant to Dawn of Justice as a story and film because they borrow heavily from the story and the visuals of those two stories. So I'm actually okay that the mention of those things get thrown into the mix here. But the Dark Knight trilogy, like, it's not even, I don't understand it. Okay, so Preston goes on to say, quote, Snyder and his collaborators, which sort of makes me gives me I don't know, World War II, like Nazi vibes. Is he trying to compare? I know collaborators, like, if someone like partners up with you to work on something, that could be a collaborator. But I get this vibe from this reviewer that he wants to use collaborator as like this bad guy use of the word. But that's just me. That's just me reading into it. It says Snyder and his collaborators are so busy establishing the DC Comics universe on screen with all the attendant bits of Easter egg business that entails that they forget to make any of it worth sitting through. This is a film where the punishment isn't just shared among the stars. Every second of its 153-minute runtime is keenly felt, unquote. Why wouldn't Snyder work towards, quote, establishing the DC Comics universe on screen? Isn't that his job to do so? Isn't that what he's being paid to do as a director of this film, to set up the world of DC? Even if he wasn't setting up sequels, he still needs to establish the DC universe on screen in Batman v Superman, which he does through use of Metropolis and Gotham City and the world that these two characters live in. He shows the Batcave and we go to the Daily Planet. He's supposed to do that. What is Zack Snyder supposed to do? That's his job. I don't understand why pointing that out is a bad thing. Why it's a negative thing. I also don't understand why it's a negative thing to include Easter eggs. Why can't he do that? Why is that a bad thing? I don't understand that. Preston goes on to say, quote, it should tell you everything about Dawn of Justice that Wonder Woman, played by Gal Gadot, arrives in the film more or less as she does in the trailer. Hey, all of a sudden, there she is, unquote. First, Gal Gadot doesn't just appear in the film as Wonder Woman. She's there quite a bit earlier in the film as Diana Prince. She's sprinkled throughout the film. So the big fight against Doomsday is not the first time Gal Gadot shows up. So I just want to point that out. Also, I don't know which trailer that Preston is talking about here, but it actually doesn't matter which one he's talking about because the statement is false. And I brought some overlays to prove it. So the assertion here that the reviewer is making is that when Wonder Woman first shows up in the film, so should just like recap how she shows up in the film. Wonder Woman as the tiara, lasso, sword, shield wielding Diana Prince. That Wonder Woman first shows up when she comes in to save Batman from Doomsday's heat vision. She drops down and she has her iconic pose with the bracelets. That's the first glimpse of Wonder Woman, official Wonder Woman as the superhero that we see in the film. So I just want to keep that in mind. So his assertion, though, is that Wonder Woman arrives in the film more or less as she does in the trailer. So he's saying that Wonder Woman, that her entrance is given away in the trailer. Well, I disagree. And I actually went back into all the trailers to find out how they sprinkled her in to the trailers. So let's take a look at some of the visuals from trailer 2. So this is the second trailer. So Wonder Woman is shown with her shield with Superman as they are in the Doomsday fight. Then we see a glimpse of her with the shield. She sort of brings it down so it reveals her face. Then the last shot of her in trailer 2 is the Trinity shot with Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman. So those are not the first glimpse of her when she saves Batman. So that's trailer 2. Doesn't give it away there. All right, here is the Comic-Con trailer. So we see Diana Prince in her white suit, which I don't. I can't remember now. I have to go back through the film again, but I don't think this shot is actually in even the Ultimate Edition. Somebody fact check me on that. So that's definitely not the first appearance of Wonder Woman when she saves Batman. Also in the Comic-Con trailer, this is her in that scene, but this is not the first. This is not the actual entrance. Also in the Comic-Con trailer, we see Diana Prince as she's leaving the gala, kind of giving the eyes to Bruce Wayne. And also in the Comic-Con trailer, we see Wonder Woman with the shield as she's kind of fighting Doomsday amid the battle. So none of those show her actual entrance as Wonder Woman into the film. This is not when she saves Batman. So none of those things gave her her entrance away. Then in the final trailer for Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, and these are all screenshots I took from the official Warner Brothers YouTube account. So you can see the titles up there. If you want to go and fact check me on that, I would encourage you to do so. Go back and look at these trailers for yourselves. So in the final trailer, we have Wonder Woman launching herself forward at Doomsday in the fight with her sword and her shield. And then we also have Bruce and Diana sort of flirting at the gala. So none of those give away Wonder Woman's entrance. I think that's actually great because in the screenings that I saw, I went to see it 15 times in the theater. Everybody, when I was in the theater, was like so pumped at Wonder Woman's entrance because it was unexpected that she would save Batman. And so that's what made that appearance so awesome, is because the music kicks in, you have that electric cello, and you see that iconic pose, and she comes in, there's like the fire of the heat vision. She like is revealed through the fire. It's awesome and not spoiled in any way by any of those trailer shots. So I really don't know what the reviewer here is talking about. But that's my conclusion using screenshots from the actual trailer. So I'm not sure what he was referring to, but I'm pretty sure we just proved him false on that assertion. Okay, so and also I guess you're just supposed to go with it. You're just supposed to believe everything he writes in this review. It's one of my favorite things with these reviews, that they write them and they release these reviews before the film comes out. So there's a short amount of time that they can say whatever they want to in a review. And there's no way you can fact check them until the film comes out. But by then, the damage is already done. That Rotten Tomatoes score has already been calculated. The damage is done. So they don't even care if they're right or wrong. So they can say whatever they want to in a review, and it doesn't matter. It could be right, it could be wrong, it could be true or false. It doesn't matter. They could lie to your eyeballs when you're reading it. It doesn't matter. They don't care. So they have no incentive to be right, to be correct in these reviews. And so it's always one of my favorite things when they write something that's obviously false, and you can actually go back and look at it and show that it's false. So I enjoy that. It's fun to go back and do some research there. Okay, so continuing on, Preston writes, quote, "It doesn't help that the film's nominal villain, Lex Luthor, played by Jesse Eisenberg, is played like some kind of half-crazed Mark Zuckerberg, all grand vision and irritating tics, and whose most menacing characteristic is that he might start speaking again," unquote. So why is any of that a bad thing? Why is him being a half crazed Mark Zuckerberg and a Zuckerberg with all grand vision and irritating tics? Why is any of that a bad thing? I don't see why that's a problem. Um, I actually think, Mark Zuckerberg, in real life actually, some could argue he has some evil tendencies with the way Facebook can control information. So that's actually pretty menacing in and of itself. If you likened him to Mark Zuckerberg, who is a very powerful individual who can control the flow of information, who has the ability to censor people and shut down avenues of information, and actually has a lot of money and a lot of influence with government officials. I mean, you put that in the guise of Lex Luthor, and that's pretty scary in itself. But the reviewer here mentions that this Mark Zuckerbergian comparison and the irritating tics are the most menacing characteristic about this version of Lex Luthor. And our friend here, Preston, who doesn't want to spoil anything, doesn't mention that Lex Luthor orchestrates a fight between Batman and Superman, hoping for them to kill each other. He doesn't mention that Lex Luthor pushes Lois Lane off of a skyscraper. He doesn't mention that Lex Luthor causes an international incident in Africa that results in the death of the people there. He doesn't mention that Lex Luthor orchestrates the blowing up of the Capitol with people, including United States senators and his own personal assistant, Mercy Graves, as well as the witness in a wheelchair who had lost his legs. All of those people die. All of those people die. Lex Luthor cares nothing for those people. He blows up this symbol of the American government and this a symbol of the United States, and that ties into his dialogue about the greatest lie in America, and so that's not menacing to Preston here. What about creating doomsday? Creating doomsday, this unkillable creature, is that menacing? I guess Preston just, really, he doesn't mention all of this stuff to protect us. He doesn't want to spoil any of these things for us. So he would talk about why Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor is bad, but he just can't. The review doesn't want to spoil anything, so we're just gonna have to trust him on this one too. Okay. So continuing on, Preston says, quote, "There is much, much more, including several false endings," unquote. Like what? What are the false endings? I'm actually curious. I'm genuinely curious what the false endings are. I can't think of anything. What was false about the endings? Somebody fill me in. I'd love to know. Preston also goes on to say, quote, "But all of it, so much sound and fury signifying nothing," unquote. This is how you know Preston is smart and well read, because he's quoting Shakespeare's Macbeth. It's definitely not a very famous saying that most people would know. So this is how you know that he's really asserting his intellect, his authority as a reviewer by quoting Macbeth here. Very, very clever to put this very, very famous saying that most people know from Shakespeare. And I'm going to take a sip of water because my voice is about to go. Oh boy. I might be losing it with this review. Hopefully I can keep it together and get through this one. Oh man, I might have to do a part 2 on this one. Hang on a second. These reviews might be killing me, people. It might be causing me harm. All right, so let's continue to go on and see if we can get through this one. All right, where did we leave off? Okay. Preston says, quote, feels like little more than a forced march through the burnishing of Warner Brothers' intellectual property. And this is a great statement. There is no sense of urgency and no dramatic stakes, unquote. Woo! I'm gonna have to take another sip because I can't believe that that just happened in a review. My apologies to the viewers. This doesn't normally happen to me, but for some reason, I can't talk. Okay, so no urgency and no dramatic stakes. How would Preston describe the urgency of needing to stop Doomsday? Would Lex Luthor becoming a straight up terrorist with the Capitol bombing be considered dramatic stakes? What more urgency and dramatic stakes does Preston need than the death of Superman? That seems pretty urgent and dramatic to me. I don't know. That's strange. Okay. Preston goes on to say, quote, so much of this film feels like marketing time until Batman and Superman go at it. But once they do, even that confrontation is anticlimactic, unquote. Why is the question I have. Is there a reason why Preston can't explain why? Is it because it would be spoilery to do so? Am I just going to have to accept what he's writing is true until I can actually see the film for myself? I guess so. Because there's no real explanation about that. Preston goes on to say, quote, technically, Dawn of Justice is proficient, but after about an hour, viewers might feel as if they have been clobbered into submission, unquote. So this is something that I talk about a lot, and I try to remember for myself, even when I'm doing these live streams, about not speaking for other people. I've tried to sort of remind myself, even in this live stream, not to do that. Preston is doing that here in this review, that viewers might feel if they've been clobbered into submission. How does Preston know that about every viewer who watches this film? There's absolutely no way that he can speak for everybody who watches this film and feels what they feel about this film. There's no way he can know that. So, in my opinion, my recommendation, if you want to be a film reviewer or a film critic, don't do that. I try to do that myself. I only speak for what Rebecca thinks and not for everyone else, because I'm not going to see the world and the film and the story and the characters the same as anybody else. I can only speak for myself. All right, continuing on, Preston writes, quote, between cinematographer Larry Fong's frenzied images and Hans Zimmer and Junkie XL's thudding ham-handed score, unquote. Now, I'm used to these top critics bad-mouthing Dawn of Justice's score, even though I think it's, personally for me, I think it's one of the best scores in the DCEU. And even Patty Jenkins had to steal it, or she didn't have to steal it, but she did steal it for Wonder Woman 1984. So she must think it's pretty good. But describing Larry Fong's cinematography in BVS as, quote, frenzied images, unquote, is enough to make me quit reading this review, because I can't take it seriously. I can't take it seriously. But thankfully, we're close to the end, so I might as well finish this out, and hopefully I'll get through it without continuing to to cough and needing some water. So I find it strange that anybody with any credit as a film critic would badmouth Larry Fong's cinematography in BVS, because the entire film is just beautiful. But that is just my personal opinion, I guess. All right, so continuing on, Preston says, quote, all of it from opening credits to the final shamelessly sequel-stoking image before the cut to black is aggressively big, loud, intense filmmaking with all the subtlety of an elbow to the nose. Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice is not, however, too big to fail. That it manages to do all too well, unquote. Okay. So I got a couple questions about this section, which is basically the ending of the review. So Preston says sequel stoking image before the cut to black. So this is, I'm assuming that Preston is talking about the shot of inside Clark Kent's grave with the casket and the dirt floating above the casket, which is a great ending for a film. It's so good the way it's done, because it's just enough to kind of leave you with a little bit of hope, and then it cuts to black, and it's like, oh, he's coming back. He's gonna come back. Personally, I love that ending. Um, but Preston seemed to not like the image because it was stoking a sequel. um, did Preston want BVS to resurrect Superman in the same film in which he was killed off? Is that the expectation that this reviewer had? If he did, if that's the expectation that Preston had, maybe he should go watch the animated film Superman Doomsday and let me know. I'd be curious if Preston thought that Superman Doomsday made that work. I'd be curious about that, because that film so largely didn't work that they had to try again with the animated version of Superman and the Doomsday arc, and they did it in two films. They split it up, the death of Superman and the return of Superman, in two films. So I'm just curious. I'd be curious about Preston's thoughts if he watched Superman Doomsday, where they kill Superman and then they resurrect him and everything's happy by the end of just one film, or if he thought the second attempt at the animated version of the death of Superman, where they have part one and part two, if that works better. I would just be curious. That's something that I would want to know, if he thought that would work better. Because I don't know why that's such a complaint, why that's a problem, that they would kill Superman in one film, leave you with a little bit of hope at the end, and then have another film where he resurrects and it's a big deal. That seems totally coherent, logical, and awesome to me. And I think the way it's done ultimately, especially when you see it play out in Zack Snyder's Justice League, and the way it's done, where it sort of circles back to Man of Steel, and you get a lot of that imagery that comes full circle. I love that. I love that. And I know that this, as we're reading this came out in 2016. So Preston here did not have the good fortune of seeing Zack Snyder's Justice League at the time. But even still, why is it a problem to leave with a cliffhanger? Why is that a problem? I mean, personally, I like a film to have a beginning, a middle, and end. I'm not as much a fan of sequels, although there's certain genres and there are certain films where that's warranted, like Back to the Future. I love part one, part two, part three, but it's all one story. It's all one connected story about these time traveling characters, and ultimately, I love that. I mean, people could make the case about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's all one big story. Some of the films stink, some of them are awesome, but it's all one big story. And they have cliffhangers for days. They even have cliffhangers in the credits. I don't know why it's such a big problem. Um, when Batman v Superman does it here, even in the Dark Knight trilogy, which Preston alluded to earlier in the review, the end of the Dark Knight has a little bit of a cliffhanger where Batman's being chased by the police and the dogs. That seems like it's going somewhere. You can't end with Batman being hunted. Surely there's going to be another follow-up film to that. Batman Begins ends with a little bit of a cliffhanger with the Joker card. Why is it so bad when BVS does it, but every other film that has a sequel and a cliffhanger ending, that's okay? That I would have questions about that. Also, Preston describes the filmmaking in Batman v Superman as, quote, aggressively big, loud, and intense, unquote. And I think it's interesting. Maybe this goes back to the spoilerific hesitation of Preston here in this review. But Preston doesn't let you know that this is because the big, loud, and intense tone of the film is largely in relation to the story that it's telling and the angry character of Batman. If the film is just portraying a character journey as it should be, and portraying it authentically and realistically, is that bad? Should a film about a Batman driven by revenge who wants to kill Superman be small, quiet, and calm? I don't know. I guess I'm just putting that question out there to see what other people think. But my answer to that question is no. All right. Well, I made it through that review. I almost possibly died in the process. I don't know. Sometimes I talk so much that my voice starts to go on me, but I think we made it. So yay, we made it through the review. hopefully, hopefully that was that added value to somebody, gave anybody who watched this something to think about. Just to hop into the live chat and just kind of go over some of the comments here. Let's see. A user named White People Pro says, talking about the things that we that I kind of went over about Lex and what Preston was referring to with Lex and his menacing characteristics. This user said it's a modern Lex, and I agree. I think the way that they went about portraying Lex Luthor in Batman v Superman was to take Lex and put him in our modern day and see what he would do. How would he actually try to accomplish the evil things that he wanted to achieve? What would he be doing? What would he be like? What would he look like? How would his business be different? I think all of that's such a cool take. The fact that he's sort of a scrawny, nerdy guy is a great foil for Superman, who's this sort of, bigger, heroic, bulkier, stronger guy. And I think that's really, it's a cool take on that I really enjoy. And it's not completely unique. That Lex Luthor is very much like the one in Birthright. So it's not out of the realm of possibility to tie into the source material of the comics. So I personally love Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. He's my favorite Lex Luthor. So I think that's great. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this week's live stream. If you missed this live, I hope you'll consider sharing your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you ever have any questions about when I'll be live, sometimes I'm not very consistent. Sometimes I travel or I have things going on Sundays that I can't change. So sometimes I have to reschedule some live streams. So just check out youtube.com/duckmilkprod and see when I'm scheduling the live streams. That'll give you a good indication of when I'm going to be live. I try to keep those up to date. So just check the channel. I'll be scheduling all the streams in advance so you'll know when I'm available and when I'm going to go live. And if you do have a BBS review that you'd like to share that you think actually does a good job, that adds value to you as a reader, that taught you something about the film or made you think about something, please share it with me. I'd love to share reviews that do a good job or do something well. We talk a lot, I plus people in the chat or people in the comments is we. I know we talk a lot on this channel and in this series about reviews that sometimes don't do things very well. But I would like to know about reviews that do things well in terms of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. So if you have some reviews that you want to share with everybody, please drop them in the comments and I'll make sure everybody gets to see it. All right. Well, if you would like to, I do. I think in my video description, I have a link to my friend Mike's Make-A-Wish fundraiser that he's doing. If you would like to support him, you can click on the link in the video description below. He's a good friend of mine, and he's a big DC fan. He actually got me into reading Teen Titans comics, and that's where I became a big fan of Donna Troy. So Mike is a DC guy. So if you want to help him and raising money for Make-A-Wish, which is a great charity and a great thing for kids, especially if you'd like to help support him in that and give to a good cause, you can click on that link in the video description below. And thank you in advance if you're able to give. Anything is good to give. So even if you think it's a small amount, it doesn't matter. Anything is a good amount. All right. Well, I think I'm going to wrap up this live stream. So I'm going to toss it over to voiceover Rebecca, and she's going to wrap this up. If you would like to see more of these live streams, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel at youtube.com/duckmilkprod. If you'd like to keep in touch with me personally, you can follow me on Instagram at The Derby Kid and on Vero at Derby Kid. You can hear my thoughts on the CW Supergirl TV series and all things Kara Zor-El over at Supergirl Radio by visiting supergirlradio.com, subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts, or subscribing to the DC TV Podcast YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/DCTV Podcasts. Also, please check out the Justice League Universe podcast for in-depth analysis on the DCEU films, including Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And before I go, I hope that this live stream video series will inspire you to think more critically and thoughtfully about film and storytelling. I'd like to leave you with this quote from C.S. Lewis's book titled An Experiment in Criticism. "The truth is not that we need the critics in order to enjoy the authors, but that we need the authors to enjoy the critics." My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life.